Just can't get the timing down. Hello and welcome to Corner Comics, your mostly weekly comic book reading club. I'm your host, Burkoff. My friends and I get together, we share a few issues with each other, and then we talk about those issues. Gentlemen, how are you doing this week, and where can people find you on the interwebs?
I am doing
I'm doing
fantabulous. Sorry, fantabulous, and
no
you can
worries.
find me at emmanuelthestory.com and on Instagram at em_man_you_el cornercomics.net.
I am doing exactly what I have been designed to do. That you can find me on Twitter at Walrus, that's at WALLRUSS. You can find me on blacksuperherofan.com. You can also find me at comiccreatorsofcolor.com. And you can find me here at cornercomics.net.
That's right.
Anything else? Am I leaving something out?
I don't think so.
There we go.
Every Sunday we stream
Okay, good.
on twitch.tv/Corner Comics. If you're listening to us, you're probably listening to us on Google or Apple or Stitcher or Anchor. We appreciate that and thank you for listening to us. And if you want to check out any of the archives and the show notes, you can do that on our website, cornercomics.net. We got a pretty big week this week, I feel like. Got some classics, got some new comics, and some modern classics, question mark.
I like it.
So yeah, I've got two issues. Russ has got two issues. Emmanuel's got two issues. The two issues that I'm going with this week are some of those comics that are up in the glass cases that you never ever read and always covet to have in your collection. The first one is Amazing Spider-Man number 129. This is the first appearance of Punisher. And my second issue is Avengers number 87, and this is the origin of the Black Panther. Russ, which two comics do you have?
I have Milestone Returns Zero. So as we know, Milestone Comics are returning, and this is the comic, the reader, I guess, to sort of get you started or rejuvenate your interest. And I also have Badger number 1 by First Comics, which is also kind of old. And it's a revamp, and it's still old.
Yeah. Emmanuel?
I have Ultimate Spider-Man, Volume 1, issue number 13. This is the 2001 version of Ultimate Spider-Man. Then also I have Planetary, number 1. By the way, Ultimate Spider-Man was Marvel, if you did not know. And Planetary number 1 is by Windstorm Comics. And I believe DC Comics is the overarching umbrella of that. And it is issue number 1, 1999.
Yeah, so a little publisher history. Wildstorm was Jim Lee's imprint of Image Comics. He then sold the studio to DC. They bought up the rights and the name and everything. And I guess I'm not sure. I think he's a high level like exec with DC now, making big
Yeah,
decisions.
if he's like, I don't want to say he's a CEO, but he's in the top 3.
Yeah,
He's that big.
Yeah, so good move for him. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. First issue of the week, Amazing Spider-Man 129, the first appearance of Punisher. I know you guys always give me shit for saying that these are classics without without any justification. I think this one stands alone, or stands on its own rather. Pretty iconic cover. I think the cover kind of shocked people when it came out because it was Spider-Man with crosshairs on his chest. Yeah, what are your guys' thoughts?
Right out the
Emmanuel?
gate, want to comment on the recoloring. I don't think it was as vibrant as it was when it first came out. So kudos to whoever remastered it or did the overarching coloring. The art itself, definitely a product of the time. I highlighted a panel where Spider-Man is on a rooftop changing his garb from his Spider-Man clothing to Peter Parker, and in true Peter Parker fashion, he's doing an internal dialogue, but like he freeze frames to his face being comedic. I don't understand the logic behind that. He's thinking about like how come Peter Parker has to be so upbeat when Spider-Man's life is just so downtrodden. So he does this. There's this panel where Peter Parker is just he has a weird face. Yeah, it is really odd and peculiar. The slang is definitely a product of its time. I like it though. I really like the fact that this was the first introduction of Punisher. I remember reading this back when I was a kid, and I really didn't know what to think about Punisher. He does seem to have a moral compass. Then again, he murders, which goes to everything that heroes do. But then again, that's kind of more realistic because if a superhero were alive and well today, like a real superhero, I'm sure he or she would murder. Um, but anyway, I digress. The comic itself, it was great. It was a great throwback. I think it's a classic. It's the first introduction of the Punisher. I just have issue and with the whole relationship Punisher has with what is it?
Jackal.
Jackal. I was gonna say Goblin. Yes, Jackal. But I think Russ wanted to comment more on that, so I'll leave the rest up to him.
Okay. Well, first of all, if you don't already know, I think Peter Parker is a terrible character. I think Spider-Man's a great character. Right? But Peter Parker is worthless. He's always worrying. He's always woe is me, whatever. But this flips it. This just shows how much he's changed. Then this, Parker is like, watch out there now. You know what I mean? He's smiling. He's like, hey, baby, I got you. You know what I'm saying? This is Peter Parker I could work with, right? And
Yeah.
Spider-Man is all, oh no, woe is me, right? So this is a 180 degree from the Peter Parker we know, right? So that in and of itself is interesting because obviously I read this book back in the day, and I know that was the norm at this time, you know. And now you see what they've written. Peter Parker is pretty much terrible now. But Spider-Man is always upbeat and always got the moves and everything else. So I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting that Punisher, who kills villains, is sitting there with a costume Jackal and not shooting him. That just seems a little wrong. I kill villains, but I'm sitting here with a villain who gave me a weapon, who's telling me to shoot somebody else,
Right.
right? So why don't I get that information and then shoot him? He don't have a spider sense. Why didn't I do that? So Punisher is kind of not. This is not. I don't feel like it was thought out the way it should have been. Right. So the Punisher is here with the Jackal in his Jackal clothes, who's telling him, and Jackal is telling him Spider-Man is a villain that needs to be killed. What do you think Jackal is? There's no good guys named Jackal anywhere. Right? Why is it that you think that it's okay to work with him and then go back, talk to him, and work with him again, and only the third time do you finally figure out that he's a bad guy? Are you seriously? If you don't know that, then what are you doing shooting criminals for? Right? So anyway, I didn't like that, but then I also remember this was written at an earlier time.
Yeah.
Things were simple, plots were simple. So this plot would not fly in current comics, right? But
I think I think they would have had the Jackal as his Professor alter ego, convincing the Punisher. Like in today's times, if they were to write it today, it would be the Professor convincing Punisher that he needs to kill Spider-Man secretly as the Jackal, the villain. Instead of the way that it was done
and
here.
then one final thing. Agreed. One final thing. On the first page of the comic, Punisher is shooting a wax version of Spider-Man. Who got time to make that? Who got time for that? You trying to tell me
villains
Jackal made a
of
wax
the
version
1960s?
or
Yes.
a marble version of Spider-Man for Punisher to shoot? And after I did all that work, I probably wouldn't want anybody to break it, right? But Punisher. So the first thing you see, you got a marble Spider-Man thing, and Punisher shoots it and kills it, I guess. So, really,
Which I don't know
Jackal
why
loves
Jackal is
Spider-Man that much.
praising.
He lovingly crafted
I don't know why Jackal is praising
Go ahead.
Punisher for the destruction of that statue. It's a statue. It's going to stay stationary. So that's no indication of Punisher's prowess. It's just weird. It's all weird.
Yeah, I think he did it just to say, I really appreciate you, and I want you to know that I'm in your side, I'm on your side, I'm in your, you're doing the world a great service, right? That's what he says, the world a truly great service,
Yeah.
right? So, anyway, it is a comic of its time. I do also applaud the new coloration because it didn't look this good originally.
Yeah.
But I do like, this reminds me of the Spider-Man flipping around. You see a lot of that flipping around and spider posing that only Spider-Man can do. I like that.
Mhm.
So the weird Spider-Man goes, that was very weird.
It's almost like
But
they
when
forgot
you look
to.
at he,
It's almost like they forgot to put in the word bubbles. Because it's just
Yeah.
this blank image.
So
like,
it's-
okay.
So, but then you see him sitting on the edge of the desk with his hand in his leather jacket pocket, going, "Hey, Betty, how you doing? Like I'm a pimp,
Yeah.
right? You know
yeah.
me. What's popping, right?" I'm like, "That's not Peter Parker, right? There's no angst in that at all." So anyway, very much a comedy time. In it, I have to say that it is a classic in that it introduced the Punisher. It also gives you a starting point to know how far the Punisher has come. To really get an idea, like this is his first imagining, and also to show you the major change in Peter Parker, how they watered him down and made him pretty much the weakest emotional person on the planet.
Yeah. So definitely a read, maybe not a buy, based on the price tags of
Yeah,
today.
buy it. Don't buy it, but buy it if it's part of a treasury, because I'm sure Burkhoff, you will have. If there's a treasury of a group of classic comics, you would say that was okay to get.
Yeah.
And this would probably be in that treasury. But by itself, no. But read it because it's definitely worth a read because it's the first imagining of the Punisher, to see how much he has changed and also get a different view of who Peter Parker was and could have been if they continued to write him that way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Manual, same sentiments. It's a read,
I
not a
do.
buy.
Yeah, it's definitely a read. It's definitely a read. I do want to speak more on the character of Peter Parker, but that'll be later.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll save
You
that
can. Okay. All
for,
right, yeah.
for our second Spider-Man issue later on. All right. So my second issue of the week is the Avengers issue number 87. This is the as I mentioned, the origin of T'Challa, the origin of Black Panther. This one, I sort of just going through, like I said, I wanted to take a look at some older comics that are the ones that are up on the shelf encased in glass that you'll never buy, and if you do buy it, you're definitely not going to read it because you don't want to devalue it. So I was looking for those types of issues, and I was pleasantly surprised by this particular book, and by the ending. There's some dialogue at the end that I really enjoyed, and it was a little heavier than what you would normally find in a 60s 70s comic. So what are your guys' thoughts?
I'll go again. All right. So I keep forgetting that Clint Barton was Goliath. It never really sticks. I'm sure after today, I'll forget all over again because he is just Hawkeye in my mind and heart. He is always perpetually Hawkeye. Of course, he's Ronin too, but not Goliath. So I was kind of taken aback by that, and I was like, "Oh yeah, he is. I remember that." I don't think I've ever read this origin story, so this was a treat for me in that I get to see T'Challa's upbringing. I knew these things. I just never read the issue. I knew he studied abroad in America and Europe and just around the world to just gain more knowledge about the world science and all these other martial arts that he couldn't really do in Wakanda. So I really appreciate the character. This gives him a lot more depth. Well, I wouldn't say a lot more, but it gives him more depth than I had before. The whole AIM thing, their suits always are hilarious. The Even to this day, they still have ridiculous suits, and I think that's on purpose because advanced auto mechanics or whatever the acronym AIM stands for. I know it's advanced in mechanics in there,
Advanced idea
but
mechanics.
yeah,
Yeah.
advanced idea mechanics. So to have such a unique organization on the surface, it is great. It's a great organization, but then you look in depth, they want world domination, blah blah blah. But all in all, this issue I really liked. I really appreciate this issue. I would consider this a buy just because it is the origin story of Black Panther. The other one wasn't a buy, even though it was the origin story of Punisher, because Black Panther just is a more iconic character, and he's more in circulation, and he's more popular now. Even though the Netflix series had Punisher, this was great. This book is definitely a buy. I enjoyed it, and again, the slang is definitely a product of its time. I'm done.
Okay, a few things. Um, I found it interesting. Now, if you're Goliath and you're in the Avengers mansion, and in order to sit in the room and you have to sit on your cover your knees, why don't you just shrink back to regular size? Why do you need to be giant inside the Avengers mansion? You know what I'm saying? Is that only so that the layman like me who's reading the book was like, oh, that's Giant Man, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I think
Right?
that's probably part of
obviously
it.
have. Okay. The second thing is Hawkeye saying almost racist stuff, not quite racist stuff, not really racist, but like, oh, if you're homesick for your jungle version of Disneyland, I'd have brought you a pet tsetse fly to perk you up. I'm like, that's kind of racist. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying he did intention. I'm not saying, but I'm saying that couldn't fly now. All right? You gonna call your whole country a Disneyland, jungle version of Disneyland? Really? You know what I mean? You don't. To a king? Okay, so you lost me there. Now, if you guys have it up and you can take a look, I want to call your attention to a panel.
Okay.
Okay? This is right after Hawkeye says his foolish thing. At
Yes.
the end of that page, you've got Black Panther with a cup of tea.
Yes.
Now scroll down a little bit as Black Panther begins to recount his origin. Look in the upper left corner and see Black Panther talking, but that's not a black person.
I thought it was Reed Richards because he mentioned something about the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I thought it was Reed Richards.
Some of my
But if
story
you
is
look
known
at
to
it-
the Fantastic Four.
Okay, maybe. I'm just saying.
Okay.
If that's the case, you got one headshot.
I thought it was
That's
weird, but
without the four. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
So anyway, I'll move on from that.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
get it. I understand. I'm just co-signing on
Alright.
what you're saying.
All right, I'll move on from that. And I like the idea of he trained and all that. What it didn't do in his origin is tell him what the special herb did for him. It just says he's running and then he go gets it and he can fight better. That's it, right?
yeah,
So basically, he's just a guy who learned to fight, basically Batman, right? Went to school, learned and all that, and then he's basically Batman. He's able to, do what Batman could do in his tribe. And then he took a special herb and all of a sudden he could beat everybody up, right? That's it, right? And there's special herb that was on top of the mountain that anyone could have got some mountain climbing gear and got some. Basically, anybody could have become Black Panther, but that's another thing. But it feels like a much more watered down. Let's just say I like the modern version better.
okay,
That says a lot more to his heroism, a lot more explanation as to what the herb actually does. Because you finish the story and it was just in a little side note. Okay, yeah, the herb, I took the herb, right? And all of a sudden I was able to take him, right? I'm like, why did you fight? Why did you go to school and shit? Why did you lift weights? Just take the herb, be done, right? You could have been that dude.
well, to get
Right,
to
and
to get to the
also,
point though,
uh,
where he could actually get the herb, you had to be, because there is a panel where it shows him like scaling a mountain. Like I wouldn't be able to do that shit.
Agreed.
So
So no matter, yeah, but of course, you would have used mountain climbing gear, so maybe you could have made it. Right? He did it with his bare hands.
yeah.
Right? So the fact that no one else is going to get mountain climbing gear. And I felt like his friend betrayed him or it had changed back.
Yeah,
And,
that
you
was
know,
really
sort of,
quick. That was like 2 pages. You have his, I'll put brother in quotes, who betrays him and then redeems himself and is a martyr, all in about 2 pages.
I say it's in one page, but anyway, so that, but you know, we looked at an old book last week, and you know, I'm gonna say shortcuts were taken.
Yeah,
All
totally.
right, so there's a lot of things that probably should have been told in this book, but shortcuts were taken, which is kind of was the Mighty Marble Manor at that time. So it's not outside of what it is. A classic book. I still, unless you're a collector, I'm gonna say it's a read, not a buy.
Okay.
It's a good book, you know, for its time. There's a lot of things that hook me and make me, you know, take me off the page because they don't really jive with modern times,
Yeah.
right? Uh, uh, so I think if it's something you want to know, and again, it's one of those books where look at this and look at who the Black Panther is now and see how far the character has come. So, but this might be a collector's item because it is the first appearance of Black Panther, and it is an old as hell book, right? 13 cents on the cover, 15 cents.
15 cents, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's got to be worth some money. 15 cents. It came out back in 1971, which I felt like it's not that long ago, but actually like 50 years ago. All right. But I did read this book. So anyway, I think it's good. It has a classic thing to it, but in and of itself, not without comparing it to the new, it's not bad. It's just not, you know what I'm saying? It does everything good. The art is very good for its time, right? You can see everybody's faces. You can see the difference in their faces. Some time and energy was taken into it. So at its time, this was a good-looking book. It is the origin of a brand new character. So it is certainly a milestone, as it were, of its time. I don't think you need to buy it, and I don't think you can afford it anyway. And I don't think you would buy it as a reprint, but you would buy it as a collection of other books.
Yeah.
Like if someone collected all the early appearances of Black Panther, I would buy that book. But this comic by itself, I would say it's a read. That's
One of the things that kind of struck me as odd was a constant mention of the herb. Now, I understand that's how he got his powers. It's similar to Captain America's superhero serum. But like time and time again, yeah, if I would have punched you as a regular man, you wouldn't have went down. But because I got this herb, like it was a mention of the herb numerous times, enough for me to be like, okay, it just seems like an advocate for drug use now at this point.
Hold on, let me finish this herb, and I'm
Exactly.
You gonna catch these hands.
Exactly.
Catch these hands right after I finish this herb. You know, yeah. I feel you. And then you didn't really tell me what the herb did, but apparently the herb is banging. Anyway, I said what I needed to say about that.
So the one thing that I will point out, the line that really got me, which I really liked, was Thor saying, "The metal of the human spirit is forged upon the anvil of sorrow." I was like, that's fucking deep.
It is.
To be at the end of a
Right?
70s
and
comic.
Thor didn't
Like,
think of it. All right, and Thor didn't think of it by himself. His father told him. The story ain't that deep.
right.
I just don't feel like
Didn't
Thor is
catch
really
that.
that
That was
deep.
good.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So those were my 2 issues. Any final thoughts? All right, let's go ahead. We'll move on. Russ, your first issue of the week.
My first issue is Milestone Returns 0. This is the return of Milestone, soon to come. Finally, Static, everybody else. So if you have been excited for that, this is the primer, or this is the thing to let you know that things are a little different, but this is what is coming. So tell me what you guys think.
I'll jump in. So,
Okay.
I love Dennis Conway or Cohen. Is it Cohen?
Yeah, Cohen.
I love his artwork. And I remember, like, the first time I saw Hardware, that first issue, just him on the cover was really cool. This is a good primer for, I think, people who are familiar with Milestone, but is a little confusing for people who don't have any experience with Milestone comics.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of excited to see what they do with this because there's some good world building that does happen in this, even though it jumps around a little bit. Um, and I was never really interested in the character of Icon, but seeing him in this and being focused on and featured in this issue is definitely a character that I want to learn more about and check out. And I'm really curious to see what they do with him. It seems like they're bringing Static back to a teenager, which I feel like he was a little aged up in the originals. He was more like early 20s, mid 20s. In this, he's going to be more like the Static Shock that we grew up with on Kids WB, which is kind of cool. Those are my initial thoughts. I'm curious to see where they go with this and what they do with it. And I'm glad to see that Dennis Cohen is back doing artwork for Milestone. And so it was nice to see him on the pages here. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I have an issue with Icon's suit. Everything else about Icon, I perfectly like. I love. But the updated version of his suit, I don't think I'm feeling it. I like the red flowing cape, but the green, I'm missing the green. That red and green went perfect together. But all in all, this was a great issue, a great reintroduction, a great origin, or a restart of the origins for these heroes. And the Virgil Hawkins, I really, really love Virgil Hawkins, aka Static, and the fact that he was at a Black Lives Matter march, like that just updates everything. This was great. I still want to get more into the gas that was released that created all these bang babies. I know we'll get that in subsequent issues, more information about how they transformed, why, some pseudoscience behind it. But what really stole the show for this issue was Icon's talk to the government or to the people of the world. I think that solidified it for me. This is definitely a buy for me just because of that. To have we as humans write it, to have a human write from an outsider's perspective on our evolution as a people, that always says something or does something to me. I really appreciate that outsider's perspective on our progress or lack thereof, whether it be physical progress or emotional progress, societal progress, whatever. I definitely consider this a buy for Icon's speech alone.
Okay, I'm not a fan of Dennis Cowan's art. I may be the minority in that. I'm not saying I hate it, but it's not a draw for me. That being said, so much of his art is really part of the origin of Milestone anyway that you can't really separate him from it. Like you can't really have Milestone stuff without some Dennis Cowan in it.
Yeah.
So, you got to take all of that with it. I also like the speech that Icon made. I also like that he is playing a larger role in the world than it seems like he played in the books way back when, as far as being more open and being more accessible to the government and things like that. I think he made a valid point. I do like Static. You never really know what to do with a young 20-something Static, right? It's like Spider-Man. Once he became 20-something, right?
They
You
didn't
didn't really
know
know
how
what
to-
to do with
yeah.
him. But when he was in high school, you know what to do with him. And remember, part of Static was supposed to be a Spider-Man or Peter Parker-esque character, right?
Yeah.
So the teenage years are certainly the best place based on his origin and how they wrote him. I don't know what you do with it. I know they've tried to do it in the comics before Milestone left DC, and it didn't go over very well. Wasn't terrible, just wasn't memorable. So this is a good place for Static to be. I like the idea of some of the characters, like a husband and wife who
Yeah.
working on some scientific thing. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to point out, so Icon and Rocket, it's kind of, I mean, Icon's obviously a Superman analog, right? But to have his woman have
Yes.
powers and to fight alongside him is very different. And it's a very, very different statement to make about that type of relationship.
You mean Rocket?
Yeah.
You mean Rocket?
Yeah.
Okay, not his woman. She doesn't actually have powers. She has a force field belt that he made for her,
Okay.
basically to keep her safe, but she can use it to fly and repel things. So not necessarily powers. Still in high school. Remember Static is looking at her in high school? There's no way Icon is messing with a child. So I keep, but if you remember the origin, and you may not,
No, I don't.
she was with some people, some teenage. Okay, how the first Icon book started. She was with some teenagers that were breaking into rich people's houses, and she didn't really want to do it, but she kind of got brought into it. And she goes in there, breaks into a house, and find out it's a rich black dude, which was unexpected. And the fact that he floated a foot above the ground was like, "Get out of my home!" And they all ran. She came back. He says, "You black, and you got all these powers, and you ain't doing nothing for your people." So when you look at the Icon book, it's actually written through her.
Okay.
It's her viewpoint, right? So she is the lens by which you see Icon. I don't know if they'll continue that path, but she convinced him, excuse me, to become Icon. He was not a superhero prior to that. He was just a lawyer. He's sort of like the Colin Powell Superman. He's very much, he was very much a Republican. He was very, what I'm saying, not the average. He's like, every black man should make it, blood, sweat, tears. I became a lawyer, all that. But, yeah, but you had superpowers, dude. And so for years, since he came to Earth, which is back in slavery times, he never used his powers to help anybody.
Right.
He just stayed in the shadows. So there's a Martian Manhunter vibe to this, too,
Yeah.
to some extent. Right? So anyway, she is a sidekick, but he doesn't necessarily treat her as much as a sidekick. He sort of empowers her because she empowered him.
Okay. So I would say that's a downfall of this particular book then, because the way that it's presented, that's kind of the way that it seems. Like that's the vibe that I get from the way that they do the characters.
Well, if Batman and Nightwing were working together, Batman would talk to Nightwing the same way. But Nightwing wouldn't be, and he's still Batman. Nightwing will never going to be Batman, right? But you can still send him out on missions. I just think I see him as he's a junior partner, but
Okay.
a partner.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway, do you have anything else? Either of you?
No, I think that's it.
No.
Okay. Moving on to Badger number 1. This was a random thing I threw in. I didn't know if you knew who Badger was, but you're going to know when I got finished today. And I have some more to say about Badger because it's always been sort of an interesting comic that's sort of... Anyway, before I get into the story, you guys read it. What do you think?
I'll start off by saying that I remember digging through back issues and seeing Badger and thinking to myself, man, this guy's just a bootleg Batman. I don't want to deal with this. So I honestly have never read any of Badger's books. I do remember seeing it back in the day, and this is the first Badger book that I've actually ever read. So,
Okay.
all right. The artwork, not the best, but serviceable and does convey the story well. Having him be a military vet is kind of depressing when you get to the end because of how screwed up he is. But yeah, I mean, we're dealing with a guy with multiple personalities, who's been through a lot of shit, and I don't know how you make a superhero out of that. It's kind of, it's almost the Moon Knight conversation, I guess, but taken to a far more extreme. Because it's not like he's delusional with, I'm following a god or whatever. It's just, I've got all these personalities. I'm going to do, whatever the hell triggers. I don't know. This is a crazy book, dude. This is. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
But
Definitely.
I'll stop for right now to let Emmanuel. What are your thoughts?
All right, I have to agree. The art isn't necessarily the best. There are some panels in which it's more detailed than the previous art, which I appreciate. But if only all the art can be as detailed as their best panel, that would make the art overall great. Right now, it's a hit and miss on certain panels. I border between liking it and mad. I don't dislike it. There's just, I like it and then whatever. Those are my two feelings concerning the art. Now, the characters themselves, I have a hard time connecting or even finding some sort of emotional attachment to the main character because of just the way he's written. There is, since he has some mental issues, there's an automatic reaction to sympathize with him and to value him based off of that. But I don't think he's written in a way that's likable, at least not to me. So I'm interested, but not because I'm invested in the character. As a matter of fact, I think I'm more emotionally invested in the mage or the guy that orchestrated all this.
Yeah, the wizard in the
the
insane
wizard.
asylum. Yeah,
Exactly. He's a more likable and enjoyable character because I can clearly see his motivations. I can clearly see his just who he is. Whereas with other multiple personalities, not one of those personalities I could connect with on any basis. Like I'm not looking forward to, I really wish Badger comes out, or I really wish Duke, or I'm just saying random names now. But any of those personalities, I don't connect with any of those personalities whatsoever. So
what's
I gotta say it's interesting based off of that.
yeah, what's crazy is like you start the book and okay, so he's a military guy. They give him a dog, and he's has to train this bomb sniffing dog and whatever. And then he loses that dog, but the whole build up, you're thinking, well, there's got to be like him having a connection to animals and nature, and maybe that's where the Badger superhero persona comes from or whatever. But it never really. No, he's like locked in a cage and has this like crazy delusion, and that's where the Badger thing comes from. It's not even like he actually met a badger out in the wild, and yeah, I don't know. The best line for me in this entire book was the Badger telling him or asking him, "Will you be my human spirit?"
Juxtaposed to the spirit animal. I love it.
Yeah, and it's a shame that didn't actually happen in real life. That's just in his mind.
That being said, before you go, Russ, I did want to mention that I did read the next issue because it has captured my attention that much. So go on.
All right. So this is a retelling. There's a Badger series that went on before this, probably quite a few
80s, I think,
of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Badger was one of those books that when I dig into crates, I get 5 of them for $1.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, you know what I'm saying? And so I never bought the book at regular price. And when I bought him prior to this issue, it was always even sillier.
Yeah.
Like this is a guy, when you think of, is Deadpool insane? Let me ask you that. Is Deadpool insane?
Yes.
I wouldn't say he's insane. He's definitely
maladjusted.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So for me, this is an actual insane person.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
A multiple personality, and he's not aware of it. He's not aware of it, right? He lives fully in whatever personality is present, right? And he will fight crime and fight evil, but he's not all there. And even the whatever the mindsets that he has, they're not all there either. The individual personalities are not quite totally there either. So he's really crazy. And the only thing that would save him even in the previous comics, is that he really went out to fight bad guys. Right? He had hard luck. He would be at the breakfast table with his Badger face on and his Badger clothes, and then some tighty whitey sitting at the table drinking coffee, looking for who to go fight. It's a very weird character that only ever exists here, And this book was the first time I think they actually made an effort to make it not
To
a
explain.
quarter step up from an Archie comic.
Yeah,
To try to
explain
give an
why.
explanation. Yeah. But if you're a person that digs in the crates like I do, you're going to run across some Badger because they're not all sold. They're still out there, right? And this is the first time where they like tried to make it serious, and I think they made a decent effort. But the guy still is insane. The question is there a place? Okay, is there a place for an insane superhero? Right? Like maybe if their powers are low level, like Moon Knight. Moon Knight is not going to get a machine gun and kill people.
Right.
But can there be an insane Superman?
No.
Can there be an insane Wonder Woman?
No.
We got to kill him.
You have to have some mental.
Can there be an insane Green Lantern?
You have to have some mental faculties to reel in that power and that ability.
You say that, but yet we allow Bizarro to move on to do his thing.
Well,
is Bizarro sane?
he's also a villain. He's not a hero.
Yeah. Okay. So that's okay. But if you look at the latest, when he's part of the Broken trilogy with Jason Todd, he's a good guy.
I mean,
Right?
he's a controlled villain.
So Moon Knight is clearly multiple personality, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, even he knows he is.
Yeah.
We allow that though, right?
Well, because he's
Because
conscious.
he's not powerful enough.
Well, he's not powerful enough, and he's conscious of the fact that he's got issues.
So then let's go back to Bruce Banner. Is Bruce Banner sane?
Going back to last week's conversation.
David Banner, if you prefer. Yes. Is he sane?
If I don't know, it's a fine line. It's a fine line because I think there's once you can acknowledge that there's something wrong, you can take steps to better yourself in different areas, right?
I think we as a society, if we can.
But how you gonna better yourself if you're crazy?
If we as a society, if we can connect with your level of crazy, if you have some level of awareness to where you can connect with quote unquote regular society and say, yes, I know I'm crazy. I know that these outbursts aren't normal. Then we as a society can feel more at ease with your level of crazy. But if you're crazy and you never acknowledge you're crazy and you're just off the rails, you can't really rein that in.
So if I acknowledge my crazy, then go and kill people, but I'm trying to get better,
add an
that's
extra
okay.
step. You just add an extra step with the.
Well, I mean, if I'm crazy, the crazy doesn't stop just because I acknowledge it, right?
Well, with that acknowledgement, there's a hope that, okay, you see what we see. So therefore, there has to be some sort of modicum.
There's a baseline that you can achieve.
You trust a crazy person to self-medicate? You trust a crazy person to make themselves sane?
I mean, there's an argument to be made that people do that all the time. People are already.
And we know that's wrong.
And then
people are already doing that.
Asserting.
So anyway, before I could bring up the whole rant from last week, I'm going to say that I brought Badger in because he is a lower level crazy with actual great human level ability, and I thought it'd be interesting to get your take on it. I know that it wasn't likely that you, Emmanuel, would have seen him, but I know Matt has to run across him because I know Matt has dug into a crate or two. So I was interested to see what you guys would think about yet another crazy hero. And then, of course, something that, here's the question. Is it a read, buy, or pass? Give me your take. Emmanuel?
I definitely said read. I am going to continue with this weird spiral of issues later on.
I like that. I'll take that. Matt, he was like, no, it's not even a read. Don't read it. Stay away.
Yeah.
Leave it alone. If you see Bat in the comic shop, run.
I was going to say it's a pass, but I don't regret reading it.
Okay.
Okay. There are some redeemable qualities to the character. And I can see why Emmanuel would want to follow him. It's not for everybody. Okay. But I don't know if it's for me. So
Fair enough.
yeah.
But I thought I'd bring it out there as something that I have seen in my comic book history to see if you guys would think.
I am kind of fascinated to see that the character's still around. They're still doing books, still doing Badger books, because this was one that like I would see it, not even bagged and boarded. It was one of those books that people just didn't, didn't even take care of, So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on Badger?
Oh, thank you for reading.
All right. So moving on, Emmanuel, your first issue of the week.
Ultimate Spider-Man, Volume 1, issue number 13. This came out in 2001. Now, this is the story of Peter Parker, young teenage Peter Parker, in the Ultimate Universe. Now, it's since died and been merged into 616, the main universe. But this is young teenage Peter Parker when he just got his powers. This is 13 issues in. This is a bottle, quote unquote, episode. So they don't move from Peter's bedroom. Him and Mary Jane, they're having a conversation. There's no action sequences. There is a flashback when he's confessing to Mary Jane that he got his powers and that he is Spider-Man. What do you guys think?
Russ, you want to go first?
Ooh, you sure you don't want to go first? Sure, why not? Okay, there's no Spider-Man in this book. There's only emo Peter. All right, the emo Peter, and the Peter, by the way, that's dead, because this Peter doesn't exist in any continuity, only in the past. In fact, his whole Earth is gone. This is emo Peter, and you already know how I feel about Peter.
I have so much to say. Keep going.
I'm really not trying to buy a book. I'm not trying to buy a comic book that's really all about emo Peter. You know what I mean? It's not. There's no spider action. There's nothing amazing. There's nothing spectacular. There's nothing. Oh, what are other Spider-Man adjectives? Amazing, spectacular,
Sensational.
Sensational. There's nothing. None of that is happening in this book. This is, if you imagine, this could be the story of any emo teen in today's, except for the fact that he happens to also be Spider-Man. This is what the story is. A boy comes clean to a girl he likes, who already likes him anyway, and while he's coming clean and telling her about who he really is, the aunt goes and calls somebody because she thinks they're having sex. And she tells the girl's mother that she thinks they're having sex, and the girl's mother calls to tell the girl to come home. That's the book. That's the whole book. That's it. There ain't nothing else here. It just happens that the guy is Peter Parker. That's it.
Yeah.
So no, I'm gonna say no, pass. That's my thought on this book, and I'm willing to continue that further. But Matt, tell me what you think.
So this is an early Bendis Marvel book. I think this is either right after he did Powers or right after he got some notoriety. But this is a hard book to get through just because there is not a whole lot that is happening. It is literally a character story, which is what I like Bendis for. I mean, he writes good characters, and there's some good moments here because even as an adult now reading it, I can remember feeling that way as a teen. Having the girl in your room and you're not really doing anything, but maybe your parents suspect that you're doing stuff and they're worried about you and whatever. So on that level, I think that it works. Visually, it's still interesting, even though there's not a whole lot going on here. It does succeed in panel by panel, the different shots on the faces, different sections of the face. There's still movement that's going on here. I think that it works as a book overall, but this is a huge risk because you risk losing people not being interested in Spider-Man after this book because there is no Spider-Man. You have the mask on the cover and that's it. There's no blue or red whatsoever. I I would say it's a read if you like Bendis. It's a pass if you don't know anything about comics and have a hard time getting into this stuff. But those are my thoughts.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm really curious
So,
why you picked it,
I'm
though.
gonna.
All right. I picked it because I grew up with Spider-Man. Like, this is before the Ultimate Universe. Fell in love with Spider-Man. That was one of my first comic books I've ever written, or not written, read. Then, when I turned 14, 15, they came out with this, and he was my age. And I could kind of see myself, that awkwardness. Of course, when I got powers, it was nothing like this, but just the conversation of Peter Parker was the best part of Ultimate Spider-Man. I do believe this character development, this characterization, this personalization of Peter Parker was the best part of Ultimate Spider-Man. His relationship with Mary Jane, him letting her down, the issues that came before this, 1 through 12, he was always letting Mary Jane down. And that's kind of what we've grown to know about Peter Parker. If he's keeping a secret, he can't really keep dates. He can't really keep personal commitments because he has to go off and do something else. Now, there's angst, there's torture, but it fits because he's a teenager. It didn't seem so emo and so woe is me then, because that's that teenager. Now, if this was 20-something-year-old Peter Parker going through this, I would say, okay, get over it. This is too much. But this is a teenager going through powers and going through this body change that he cannot tell anyone about. He is saving the world. Well, not the world, but he's saving Brooklyn, his small little area of the world, time and time again, has so much responsibility, but yet he couldn't confide in anyone. And this conversation was like a huge emotional release for him. And I maintain that Peter Parker is arguably the best part of Ultimate Spider-Man.
It is kind of an interesting analog for puberty, I guess. Superpowers in this context. The one thing I will say, sort of point out something that Russ, you've always mentioned, Parker's kind of broken. In this, Aunt May is more of a mother figure and not quite as absent as she is in some of the other iterations. So that's something of note, and I guess it kind of speaks to what Emmanuel's talking about in terms of this version of Parker being pretty good.
So as a character story, it's nicely written. All right?
Yeah.
But don't sell me a Spider-Man book and don't give me no Spider-Man. That's all I'm saying.
That is
All right,
that is
there's no
very
Spider-Man
fair. Yeah.
here. He doesn't. There's no Spider-Man. There's no sticking to walls. There's no webbing. There's no there's no quips. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing about Spider-Man in this book.
He stuck to a wall.
This is a Peter Parker book. Okay, but if you there's that one part. But if you were said this is Peter Parker #1, then I have a whole lot less to argue about, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Peter Parker #1, Peter Parker #2, Peter Parker #3. This is all right in line with that. It's like an Archie book. I know what Archie is. If you sell me an Archie book, I'm not mad. You know what I'm saying? Because I know what Archie is. But here, no, you didn't do that. So that is my issue. That I didn't like it for that reason. Don't get me wrong. Character-wise, it's not bad. I'm not going to tell anybody to buy this ish though.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to tell anybody to buy it. But it's it's worth a read. Not, ish. You know what
I
I mean?
understand.
If you just want to say, I can't even, I'm like, because people buy, now if we're talking about science fiction books, that's something different. But this is supposed to be a superhero book. When you pick up a Spider-Man, you think this is a superhero book. And I just didn't feel like it gave me that. So I feel like I was hoodwinked and bamboozled.
It's part
100% understandable.
It's part of the Marvel Unlimited package. do you scroll through and possibly read it?
Yeah, I will possibly read it. Oh no, I won't read this issue. I'll read the series, and this issue will be part of it. I'm not like, ooh, I gotta go see that one.
I feel
No,
like
Right.
so.
right?
I feel like Bendis's name being attached to it gives it some credibility. Um,
Yeah, I'll go
So-
with that. I'll agree with that.
all right. Any final thoughts before we move on to the final book of the week? All right.
No final thoughts.
Manuel, your second book of the week and final book or final issue of this week.
All right. Planetary, issue number 1. This was out in 1999. The subtitle Archaeologists of the Impossible. This is a story, and it has a lot of analogs for DC characters. You'll notice at the end of the issue, but it set scene in a diner out of nowhere, and they recruit this guy in all white hair. I think his name is Mr. Snow or Dr. Snow, something. But it, he seems to be some sort of genius or competent in his line of work. And a woman recruits him to then go and investigate something in a mountain. And they come upon, I'm being very, very vague, by the way, on purpose. Then they discover what led to the death of a few superheroes, and the world gets crazier after this. You guys' thoughts?
If you're gonna give me $1 million every year for the rest of my life, and I'm immortal, and all you want me to do is wear a fancy suit, I'm down. Let's do this shit. So, all kidding aside, Warren Ellis and John Cassaday. I like Warren Ellis and I like John Cassaday. So them together on a book is something that I'm interested in. The premise for the plot is a little hard to get into because it doesn't really give you a whole lot to grasp. It's sort of a lot of vague, we could be a shadowy government entity or a private institution that's got a lot of money. We're not really giving you a whole lot here. But it sort of evolves into, I guess, like a Warehouse 13 type of story.
Yeah,
I'll go with that.
It's there are these things that happen there are these things that are out in the world that people don't know about, and we are the group that handles that, and we want you to be a part of that. And you're sort of drawn into the story through the character of Snow, and you learn that that's what this organization is. And as a first issue, it's kind of a good setup once you get into it, but it's hard to get into that portion of it. So like once you find out that there's this quantum computer that is fracturing dimensions and all of that, and then okay, now I'm sold. Now I'm into the story and I'm interested. But it takes a little while to get there. As I'm gathering some more thoughts, Russ, I'll let you go through and give me your thoughts.
Okay, it's sci-fi, and I like sci-fi, and I like that I don't know everybody there, but the characters are interesting enough that I might want to read and know more. I'm also going to say I've read this book before, okay, and some of this series, so I'm automatically going to say this is definitely a read. Whether it's a buy sort of depends on how you receive it. There's enough. This is, once you get deeper into the book and the stories, this is sort of from highbrow sci-fi,
Yeah.
right? If you talk about the thing, the fracturing of the universe into dimensions, and that's after halfway the book is done, and it gives you all that story, there's a lot to unpack there. So if you're looking to have your sci-fi senses tingled, this will give you that, right? You don't know the powers, you don't know the history of the people, but they're enigmatic enough. Right, the guy in all white, he's enigmatic enough. You want to know what's his real story, what's his deal.
Yeah.
The girl with the super strength, who is just accepting everything on face value, you want to know what her deal is also, right? By the way, they did a sort of a crossover book in which, when I say a crossover, a reimagining of the book, sort of a one issue, in which this was part of the DC universe, and the woman with the super strength was actually Wonder Woman.
Oh, that's
Right?
interesting. Okay.
And then, so now if you imagine that, right? If you imagine her as Wonder Woman, but a modern Wonder Woman, maybe the story changes for you or becomes more acceptable, right? She comes in, she does what she needs to do. She doesn't worry if she knows enough because Wonder Woman would just get it done, right? So, and I think they made, I don't know if they made the guy in all white Superman or the other one, but basically they made the three of them, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. But it was Clark Kent. It was, you know, their other
Their
identities.
alter egos, yeah.
And so they made the Trinity. Yeah, they made the Trinity those characters. And if the Trinity was those characters, you would find it interesting, simply because of the backstory of the you know those alter egos.
Yeah.
So now, if you look at it like that's Wonder Woman, one is Superman, now it becomes more interesting, right? Possibly. So I think there's something there. This book will deliver on the sci-fi if you have an inkling for that. But it's also it's drawn nicely enough. It's also in a more smaller universe because you can't go full heavy metal in this kind of universe. Because if this was a heavy metal book, it would have had you because you would have had all kinds of stuff to look at, right? But they had to bring it in a more traditional comic. I think it does that well. But it is niche in a way.
Yeah.
Right? You really got to have a taste for that, right? Because a lot of people don't buy Wildstorm books for their science fiction, even though Wildstorm is a very heavily science fiction universe.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Everything is well explained, and I like the Wildstorm universe for that reason. And I would read it, right? And I'd buy the graphic novel. I wouldn't buy the individual issues. I'd buy the whole first series, and I probably will end up reading them. So I'm going to say it's a buy. And for those few people that are in that, I'm going to say it's a read, excuse me. And for the few people that are into that niche, I'm going to say it's a buy. You had more to say, Matt?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, so one of the things I put in the notes was the diner in the middle of the desert. I feel like that's a trope that's used a lot, and I want to say that Ellis did that on purpose. Like, he set the first scene there, and specifically this diner in the middle of nowhere to give you an indication of, you know, yes, this may be a superhero story based on the cover, but it's also a little Twilight Zone-ish. It's also, you know, like this on one read, this book is hard to get. This book is, let me sit down, let me go through it, and then let me marinate on it, and then go back through it again and see what I missed.
Right.
It is very layered, and Ellis is like that though. He, like with Transmetropolitan, a lot of the stuff, if you read through that, you're like, this is fucking batshit crazy. I don't know, you know, what the hell's going on here. And then if you sit and think about it and then go back, like, oh, okay, I see what he did there. This book, I feel, is like that, and it's gonna take one or two reads extra for you to actually get what all is going on here. For that, I would say it's a read, because it is, if you're into that kind of thing, yeah. It is a little highbrow. It's almost like what was the other the Americana book that you brought, Pax Americana, Emmanuel?
Yeah.
It's a bit like that. It's kind of it's a comic for comic fans, but also people that like good literature, you know. It is also free on Comixology, so I would say it's a buy because it's free.
Nice.
I'll go with that.
Yeah, but I liked it. It's a good pick. It's hard to get into if you're not into this kind of stuff, but definitely a good pick for sure.
Couldn't win you guys with Ultimate Spider-Man, but
Yeah,
won you over with the
Planetary for sure. Yeah. All right. I don't think we have anything in the roundtable this week. No additional thoughts, so we'll kind of leave it there. And then if between now and when I play the music, if anybody has anything they want to say, it's an open forum.
Let's see. The Hulk is crazy. He should be put down.
Still not an X-Men fan.
Should be put down. So we went from maybe drug him to just kill him.
You can't keep him. No, the drugging was your idea. And you can't keep a gamma irradiated superhero drug. You already know that stuff doesn't last. He's just gonna get out and get mad and kill somebody, right? You gotta exile him, right?
Okay.
The only safe thing to do with the Hulk is to exile him to another universe. That's it. Put him on another Earth where there's no sentient beings.
Doctor
And he can have
Strange could do
peace.
that easily.
Yeah, Doctor
you would
Strange
think.
could like throw him into a pocket dimension or something.
There was a time when the Hulk was in the crossroads of the universe, where he was going in and out through other universes. There's a whole series of that where he was doing that, but it was sort of random, and it was just a way to get Hulk in a different universe and see how that would work.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I remember there was one comic, this is a bit of an aside, where the Thing, the current Thing, figured out that Reed Richards could have cured him a long time ago and never did. He was pissed.
Oh, I'd be pissed
Right?
too. Yeah.
Right? So he took the cure and then used Dr. Doom's time machine and went back in time to his old self when he was still sort of not, he was still more rock than, more slime than rock, the old, right? And he fought him, and he was stronger than his younger self. So he fought him, and he gave him the cure, and he changed, and the guy changed back, and he's like, why am I not changing? And then Reed comes and gets him, and he says, you went into a different universe. Marvel says you can't change your own past.
Right.
You can only change the past in another universe, right? So as he was leaving, that Thing back there hold up his pants, because obviously they're too big now, and he says, I don't know who that guy was, but he changed my life, thank you. And, and so, so you can't go back in time and fix this. You have to put him somewhere. And Hulk may be immortal. So you got to find a sentient, peaceful world. And you know what's going to happen. Like say they do what I said. We're going to listen to Walrus, and they're going to do what I'm going to do what I say. They're going to put him in this planet. And you know what's going to happen? Years later, either Galactus is going to come to that planet, or the Kree is going to come to that planet to take it over.
Right.
And then he's going to jump, hop, skip, and beat up the Kree or whatever, and end up back on Earth again. Because that's the nature of these things.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So you actually have to put him in another dimension or in the microverse.
Yeah.
Right? So that he can the most he can do is beat up everything on that atom or molecule or whatever. Right? You keep him in a jar.
And on that note, Hulk in a jar.
Right?
This year there
Hulk
is
in a
no
jar.
Elf on the Shelf. There's Hulk in a jar.
Yep.
Still not an X-Men fan.
And we're out.
I'm still not a Dead Spider-Man fan.